John tells us in his gospel that there were specifically 153 fish. Some have speculated as to whether this number has a numerological or mystical meaning, but in all likelihood we are told that there were 153 fish because that is how many there were. They were fishermen. You can imagine there, can't you? Sort of counting them out, going 10, 20, 150, 153! We've got to write that down in our logbook, you know.
Welcome to the God-Centered Life with Josh Moody Weekend Edition. John chapter 21, we're calling this study a New Year's Resolution. Josh Moody is senior pastor of College Church in Wheaton, Illinois. I'm Todd Listee. Josh, have you ever gone fishing and counted the number of fish that you pulled in?
I'm not much of a fisherman. I've been fishing a couple of times with my son who likes it, and I was not very good, let's put it like that, but we never got, I think, above one fish, let alone 153.
Well, one is easy to count, but I'm sure that the avid fisherman will tell you you always weigh it. In fact, I think most of them have that scale in the tackle box. I've always wondered why John gives us the fish count. Well, in non-fish related news, we're wrapping this year with a look at how to glorify God.
How to glorify God. And this end of John's Gospel is a powerful way to end the year.
All right, let's get to it. John chapter 21. We're going to look specifically at verses 15 through 19. Here's Josh.
Well, we're looking this morning at John's Gospel. John's Gospel is the focus of our Advent series when we consider John's prologue. Now we come to the other end of John's Gospel, the epilogue. And in that we will find a dialogue between Jesus and Peter. Jesus asks Peter 3 times whether he loves him, and Peter replies 3 times that he does. And each time Peter is given a specific instruction by Jesus to care for the church or the sheep. At the end of this interaction, Jesus tells Peter that he will die. And John, the author of the gospel, explains that Jesus described the kind of death by which Peter would die for a particular purpose, namely to give glory to God. It's John chapter 21, reading from verses 15 to 19. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go." This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, "Follow me." So this passage then is showing us a sign that points to God's glory. What is that sign? One way to answer that question is to observe that dialogue between Jesus and Peter. So here it is. Here's what's going on. Jesus has appeared again to his disciples after his resurrection. Now he comes this time by the Sea of Tiberias, we're told. That is the Sea of Galilee. He's gone back to Galilee. And they don't immediately recognize him, do they? But when Jesus showed them how to catch a miraculously large amount of fish, John recognized Jesus and told Peter, "Look, it's the Lord." And Peter, wonderfully, exuberantly expressive as ever, Peter immediately jumps into the water. He reaches Jesus first. Peter then, on Jesus' instructions, drags the bulging net of fish ashore. And John tells us in his gospel that there were specifically 153 fish. Some have speculated as to whether this number has, a numerological or mystical meaning, but in all likelihood, we are told that there were 153 fish because that is how many there were. They were fishermen. You can imagine there, can't you? Sort of counting them out, going 10, 20, 150, 153! We've got to write that down in our logbook, Then they have breakfast together with Jesus, surely the best breakfast a man has ever eaten. And Jesus performs his characteristic tendency at mealtime, breaking bread and sharing it out, and then doing the same with the fish. It's now the third time Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead, and so they eat together. And when they're finished, Jesus, in that sort of comfortable lull after a good breakfast, after a hard morning's work, he sort of leans across to Peter and he asks Peter what was plainly intended to be a sort of meaningful question. Peter, do you love me more than these? Now, it's unclear whether Jesus means more than the other disciples, perhaps, or whether Peter is being asked if he loves Jesus more than his career as a fisherman. Either way, Jesus is asking Peter whether his adoration for Jesus is more to him than anything else. Peter answers that Jesus knows that he loves him. And this interaction happens 3 times with minor variations in the language. The variations not due to any deep hidden meaning, but for stylistic reasons, a variety of form in the reported dialogue to make it more interesting as we read it. It's important, those of us who have some Greek and are familiar with the Greek words for love, agape and philios, to remember that those 2 words are not always used of the special spiritual love, agape on the one hand, or the more normal human-friendly love, philios on the other. The words in Greek have a wider semantic range than that. Agape can also be used for simple, friendly human love, and philios can also be used for the love of God. For instance, Jesus' love is described by the Greek word philios in John 11, verse 3, and agape is used of love for this present evil world in 2 Timothy 4, verse 10. Now, the point of the repetition is that Peter needed to hear it 3 times. Perhaps in replacement for the 3 times he had denied Christ. Perhaps because also Peter needed to have emphasized what Jesus was instructing him to feed and take care of his lambs and his sheep, that is to take care of the church. See, Peter, in all his interactions that we come across in the Bible, he appears as a personality who rushed into things, doesn't he? He doesn't wait for long consideration. He quickly jumps out of the boat to greet Jesus. Without hesitation, he said he would never deny Jesus. And a little later in the Bible, he grasped very fast the idea that the Gentiles were to be included into the church and the ritual food rules were not to be a barrier to table fellowship in God's new community of every tribe and nation. Peter is someone who's quick on the uptake, and he's liable to jump at an opportunity. This is a strength. But it also means that sometimes perhaps his convictions were not as long-lasting as they should have been. And so when faced with the temptation to deny Jesus or to retreat before people who criticized him for eating with those who are not ceremonially clean, there wasn't yet sufficient of that resolve that can really only come from deliberation and reflection and then decision. So perhaps Jesus was asking him 3 times so that 3 times Peter could hear himself respond. And 3 times Peter could hear Jesus specifically instruct him personally to take care of the church. Peter perhaps was the kind of person who just needed to hear that not once, but twice, but thrice. That said, though this 3-time repeated refrain may be simply a device of repetition to drive the point deep into Peter's mind, the echo of Peter's denial must have been present for Peter 3 times. And so each denial of Jesus is rewritten now, not with a simple forgiveness, so that's there, they're now in fellowship together. He's forgiven. He's at the meal table. They're eating together. But now also with a restitution. That is an opportunity to start again, a restoration to serve.
Another possible echo from this passage coming up momentarily. But first, a quick reminder that your support is how we continue creating programs here at the God-Centered Life. And you can take care of jumping in and being a part of the team by going to godcenteredlife.org. There's a donate tab there. We'll thank you in advance. Back into John chapter 21 for the time being, though. Here's Josh.
There's though one other echo that I think we need to have reverberating in our minds as we consider the meaning of this passage, and that is the echo of the nature of the Good Shepherd. See, John in his Gospel has already told us that the Good Shepherd is the one who lays down his life for the sheep. The Good Shepherd does not run away when there's a threat to the church. The Good Shepherd is someone who self-sacrifices for the sake of the sheep. Well, Jesus is that Good Shepherd who gave up his life for the church. Well, now Peter is being told that he too will lay down his life for the church. And in this regard, he is also a sign that points to the glory of God. So I believe then that this passage is intended to teach us the following. Self-sacrificial care for the church is a sign that glorifies God. Now, if I'm right in seeing that that's the main thrust of this passage, what we're meant to learn and reflect upon and feel and think and have our hearts or our affections orientated towards, and if I'm right that this self-sacrificial care for the church is a sign that glorifies God, is what this passage is teaching you and me, well, then it raises a number of questions, doesn't it? It does for me, and I suspect it does for you. Number one will be this. Is this really practically the case? Is it actually the case that people who give up their own self-interest for the sake of caring for the church are those who have the best life and those who most glorify God? Is this the highest, most fulfilling life, giving yourself for the church? Well, that's an important question to ask, isn't it? Because just about everything in our society today would tell us quite the contrary. Today's society tells us that the kind of life that we are to seek, the kind of life that is, in John's language, most glorious, is the life of self-fulfillment. In 2005, Steve Jobs told a graduating class at Stanford University that the most important thing to remember in their lives was to follow their intuition and their dreams. That's it. Follow your dreams. Well, of course, this is the standard message that everyone is preaching today in media, in society. We are told, you and I are told over and over again that life is, in John's terms, most glorious when we find what we really want, what our true dream is, and we fulfill that. Well, along comes Jesus. He says something rather different. True self-fulfillment can only come as you follow the life pattern of Jesus, which is giving your life for God's people, for the church. Well, these are quite contradictory visions of life, aren't they? And they cannot both be true. We must decide which is true and then orientate our lives around one or other vision, Jesus's or the rebirth of the pagan world, which is taking place in our own current society today. We also need to see one other aspect of how countercultural this is, this message here that I think is present in this passage, not just present, is the message of the passage. How countercultural it is, not just sort of in secular society, but in the whole subculture of evangelicalism and Christianity in our own life right now. See, this is not only countercultural because it's telling us that the highest and best life is the life like Jesus's that gives you a life for someone else. It's specifically for that purpose, for the church. Well, that's the last thing that much of contemporary Christianity would tell us is what we should be giving our lives for, the church. It's far more common in Christian circles even. If you're not a Christian here today, this may surprise you, but you talk to your Christian friends and they will tell you it's true. It's far more common to hear the joke that church would be great if it were not for the people than to hear anecdotes from the past of our forebears who knew far better. For instance, famous missionary William Carey, when he heard that his son had been made an ambassador, said this: "My son is shriveled from a missionary into an ambassador." Well, what is the answer to the question? Whether self-sacrificial care for the church as a sign that glorifies God is really ultimately fulfilling in the best life possible? I think the answer, let me be very frank with you, I've wrestled with this week. All of my adult life has been around giving myself for God's people. I mean, I'm a sinner too, by the way, in case you didn't know, but this is what I've tried to orientate my life around. Is it really true what Jesus is saying here? And I think the answer is a right understanding of glory. It's a sign that glorifies God. You see, you and I, when we're really honest with each other, we think of glory as approval from other people, don't we? Status. Being on the podium at the Olympic Games, or whatever the equivalent would be in business life, or even church life. But by that, Jesus actually is saying in John's Gospel, that kind of glory, status, approval from other people, well, that's seeking glory from people rather than seeking glory from God. He puts a contrast there. See, when Jesus here says to Peter that by self-sacrificial care for the church he will glorify God, what does he then immediately say? Can you see what comes right after it? Follow me. Well, that's not by accident. See, glory in John's Gospel is the glory of Jesus. It's first revealed when Jesus changed water into wine. He did this and so revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. He revealed his glory. The glory is the glory of Jesus, the glory that Jesus had with the Father from the beginning, as we considered when we looked at the prologue. The glory that was displayed when God glorified Jesus at the hour of his passion, and the hour, as John describes it, his death, resurrection, and ascension to glory. So here, the glory of God that Peter is promised, here's the motivation. If, like Jesus, he gives himself, he self-sacrifices in his care for the church, the glory of God that Peter has promised if he self-sacrificially cares for the church is Jesus. That is what you get. You say, what's in it for me? That's what you get when you self-sacrifice for the church. You follow Jesus. That's what Jesus did. He gave his life for the sheep like a good shepherd, not running away, but sacrificing himself for them. Peter is to do the same, and in doing so will glorify God, and now will follow Jesus. What Peter gets by self-sacrificial care for the church is Jesus. That is glory. It is Jesus himself. That is your glory if you self-sacrificially care for the church. It's the person of Jesus. I don't just mean, the 4 spiritual laws or the sinner's prayer or something. I mean encountering Jesus, knowing Jesus. Jesus, as he's revealed in John's Gospel, is the creator of all, the Logos. You get Jesus. You will know Jesus. You'll be close to Jesus. You will experience Jesus by his Spirit. It's not just pie in the sky, it's now. You will follow Jesus. The secret of God, the Old Testament says, with those that fear him, Psalm 25, verse 14, and that secret is Jesus. When you self-sacrifice for the church, like Jesus died for the church, then you're following Jesus, and the glory of God that you get is Jesus himself. You get Jesus. That's why you come to church. That's why you attend church. That's why you serve in church. That's why you give your time and your money and your talents and your resources to church. Because you get the glory. Because you get Jesus. In April 2012, Pastor Mario Akidre, a former Muslim who had converted to Christianity, was killed right in front of his wife in his own house. And this, I think, is a reputable account. I know sometimes these stories are passed around the internet and that kind of thing, but I think this is a reputable account. My husband, she recalled, staggered into our bedroom, and I was shocked because he was full of blood. I brought him to the hospital right away. I'm telling you the story because I want you to understand that this is reality, both there and here. I brought him to the hospital right away. He was operated on for 8 bullet wounds but did not survive. Right now, Christians are being killed for their care for the church. Why are they doing it? This December the 23rd, former Archbishop of Canterbury, George Carey, wrote in the Telegraph that the persecution of Christians means that ancient Christian communities predating Islam are on the verge of disappearing from their homelands in the Middle East. Well, God is sovereign over all that, and there's a great mission enterprise going on at the same time, and many, many Muslims are being converted. Nonetheless, people are dying. Why are they giving their lives? Right now, people are self-sacrificing for the church because of the glory that is knowing Jesus, having Jesus, following Jesus, here and for all eternity, in depth and reality and power and passion, life-changing energy. Will you do the same? Will you deliberately, consciously, and immediately give up of yourself for the sake of caring for the church and so glorify God and thereby follow Jesus?
That's Josh Moody, and this is The God-Centered Life. We're wrapping a year, and that typically brings about a hope for the future, a better year next year. But perhaps a better kingdom alignment would be to anticipate opportunities to sacrifice for God's family.
So much richer, and what a kingdom purpose we're offered, to sacrifice for something of great significance. God-Centered Life, we are all about that, to get the gospel out, to call people to center their lives upon God. And as we come to this season, the God-Centered Life has a goal so that we can continue to get the gospel far and wide. And we're looking to all of us to do their part to make that happen. And if the Lord's moving in your heart, would you prayerfully consider making a contribution to that end as we call people to center their lives upon God?
Thanks, Josh. An exciting year coming to a close. We've seen our web traffic experience significant growth. The name of our ministry has come up in 6.75 million Google searches, generating 125,000 clicks. We're seeing half of our web traffic from outside the United States. We're looking at the Philippines, Indonesia, and China featuring prominently. Daily devotional use has risen 60% this year. And our online broadcast use has more than doubled. We're excited about how God is growing this ministry and very appreciative of each and every one of you who are partnering with us. Next time we get together, we got some dating advice for you.
She tells Ruth exactly what to do. Make sure you wash. It takes a mother to get away with telling a young pretty thing to have a good bath before you go on a date, I think. Put on some oil. The perfumed oil, I think.
Some really practical advice from God's Word coming your way next time. GodCenteredLife.org is our hub, our website, and this is your invitation to join us right here next time we get together for the God-Centered Life with Josh Moody Weekend Edition.